Have you ever looked at a tiny baby and just wondered, how does that become us? How does a mind that can't even process shapes yet eventually learn to solve calculus, write poetry, and understand the universe? Well, it's one of the most incredible journeys in nature, and today we're going to look at the map for how we learn to think.
You know the scene, right? You pour their milk into a blue cup instead of the red one, and suddenly it's the end of the world. Or they play hide and seek by just covering their eyes, and they genuinely believe you can't see them. To us, it's totally irrational. But what if I told you it's not irrational at all? It's just a completely different kind of logic.
And the person who gave us the key to understanding that logic was this man, Jean Piaget. He was a total pioneer who did something that sounds simple but was actually revolutionary. He stopped treating children like incompetent adults, and he actually started listening to them. He realized they weren't just getting things wrong, their minds were playing by a completely different rule book.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with Piaget's core idea, these mental blueprints he called schemes. Then we'll see how those blueprints change and evolve. We'll dive deep into the first two crucial stages of a child's development, and then we'll wrap up by looking at his huge, lasting legacy.
Okay, first up, let's get into these mental blueprints. Piaget's entire theory, the whole shebang, is built on this one powerful concept he called a scheme.
So what in the world is a scheme? You can think of it like a mental filing cabinet or a little blueprint. It's a building block of knowledge that tells us how to interpret and interact with the world. We have schemes for everything, for what a dog is, for how to use a spoon, for how to act in a library.
And these schemes start out incredibly simple, almost purely physical. For a baby, a rattle isn't really a rattle, it's part of the things I can grab scheme. A block is part of the things I can put in my mouth scheme. Their entire understanding is based on the actions they can perform.
But of course, they don't stay that simple for long. Those basic physical schemes start to evolve. The four legs and furry scheme grows into a much more complex animal category. And eventually, our minds can build these incredibly abstract schemes that let us understand something as complex as a biological process.
Okay, so if we start with these really basic blueprints, how on earth did they get so sophisticated? Well, Piaget said there's this amazing two-part engine that drives all of our mental growth. Let's break that down.
He said our minds are in this constant two-step dance. The first step is assimilation. That's when we encounter something new and it fits neatly into a mental box we already have. But then there's accommodation, and that's the really interesting part. That's when something new doesn't fit and we're forced to either change the box or build a whole new one.
Let's look at assimilation in action. It's pretty straightforward. An infant has a really solid grasping scheme from holding rattles. So when a parent offers their finger, the baby uses that exact same familiar action to grab it. The new object fits the old blueprint. No problem. But now look at this. The baby tries to use that same one-handed grasp on this big rattle, and it doesn't work. They have to adapt. They have to accommodate by changing their scheme to a two-handed grasp. This is it. This is the moment where true learning happens. The mental blueprint itself has just been upgraded.
Piaget had a name for this whole balancing act, equilibration. You know that feeling when something you learn just doesn't sit right with what you thought you knew? That little bit of mental confusion? Piaget called that disequilibrium, and he said that uncomfortable feeling is the very engine of our growth. It's the mental itch that forces us to scratch, to accommodate, and to learn.
Now, this process of equilibration doesn't just happen randomly. Piaget believed it pushes kids through four very distinct, universal stages of thinking. For today, we're going to zero in on the first two because they lay the foundation for absolutely everything that follows.
All right, let's dive into stage one, the sensory motor stage. This lasts from birth to about 2 years old, and during this time, a baby's entire universe is built on what they can see, hear, taste, touch, and do. They are literally thinking with their senses and their actions.
So at this stage, babies are like little scientists of action. They're constantly experimenting through trial and error. They might kick a mobile by accident, realize it was cool, and then do it again and again on purpose. But the single biggest, most monumental breakthrough of this entire stage is mastering object permanence. This is the world-changing realization that just because you can't see something, it doesn't mean it's gone. Out of sight is no longer out of mind.
So once they've got that down, we move into the next phase, the pre-operational stage. This goes from about age 2 to 7, and this is where the mind just explodes with new abilities. But it's still operating with its own really unique and, frankly, fascinating rules.
This is the great age of make-believe. A banana can be a telephone, a box can be a spaceship. Their internal world is just bursting with language and imagination. But, and this is the critical part, their thinking isn't governed by logic yet. They're pre-operational. That means they can't yet perform the mental operations, the logical steps that we adults take for granted.
And this brings us right back to our toddler with the wrong-colored cup. A defining feature of this stage is something called egocentrism. Now, this isn't about being selfish. It's a cognitive limit. A child at this age literally cannot imagine a point of view different from their own. They assume that what they see, feel, and know is what everybody else sees, feels, and knows too.
Here's another classic example: their struggle with conservation. You can take two identical glasses with the same amount of water and then pour one into a tall, skinny glass right in front of them. A pre-operational child will almost always tell you that the tall glass now has more water. Why? Because they get fixated on one obvious feature, the height, and they can't mentally reverse the action. For them, what you see is what you get. Appearance is reality.
So, after all that, what should we make of Piaget? Well, I think it's crucial to see his work as a foundational theory. It's the ground floor that all of modern developmental psychology was built on. But it's not the final word.
Now, modern research with all its new tools has shown that Piaget was brilliant, but he didn't get everything exactly right. We now know that babies can grasp some concepts, like object permanence, way earlier than he thought. Critics also point out that his stages can be a bit too rigid, and that he definitely didn't put enough emphasis on how our culture and our social interactions shape how we learn. But here's the thing you have to remember. Piaget wasn't working with brain scanners and modern tech. He was a master observer. He developed what he called the clinical method, which basically means he sat down and had flexible, deep conversations with kids, following their own unique train of thought. Before him, nobody was taking the inner logic of a child's mind seriously. He changed that forever.
And his legacy, especially in education, is just immense. This quote right here really captures his most powerful idea, that you can't just pour knowledge into a child's head. Learning is tied to development. It's why we don't try to teach algebra to second graders. You have to work with the brain that's in front of you, not the one you wish was there. You have to meet them where they are.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. Once you really grasp that a child's mind isn't just an empty adult mind, but a totally different world operating by its own rules, how does that change the way you see things? How does it reframe that toddler's tantrum, not as a behavioral problem, but as a perfect, logical expression of their current mental world? It really is a powerful shift in perspective. Thanks for joining me.